Welcome to Modern Home Masterminds with Bespoke Brokers. I'm Shauna Glazier, designated broker and owner.
And I'm Brittany Williamson, associate broker. We are Bespoke Real Estate, and we're also your guides to modern luxury across the state of Arizona.
Each week, we chat with masterminds shaping the modern home spaces. Do you want to get a behind-the-scenes look at your design, build teams processes? Open communication and teamwork will lead to a successful project.
From architects to builders, designers, and more, let's explore the art of modern living together.
Welcome back, listeners. Are you in the market for a cool modern property at an affordable price point? Our guest today, Joel Contreras, might just be the designer for you.
That's right. Joel is the owner of Joel Contreras Design, which is a full-service design studio specializing in modern design and interiors. With a background in both lending and real estate, interestingly enough. Joel's first foray into designing homes was in 2006, and his current focus is working to create innovative design within reach.
All right. Well, welcome, Joel. So you have certainly built yourself a big name in our local design community. But during our pre-podcast call, you mentioned that some people might see you as a bit of a controversial figure in the community. I'd love to dive into that, know a little bit about your story. And we're going to show you on our screen one of your first projects, 2302, and that was featured in Dwell. So just tell us a little background and who you are and how you got this reputation.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah.
I was a realtor, and this was like before the market crash of 2008. And I feel like everyone did kind of the same remodels back then. And if there was anything that was stylish that was done by an actual designer or architect, everyone fought over that. This was like in that affordable range of, sub maybe 800,000 or so. And the thought I had as a realtor was, if people could bring this product to the table, you had 5 buyers fighting over it, and it would sell first day for list price. So I started networking with designers and architects, and I would kind of find them their homes to remodel, places with good bones, and that worked out really good. That was kind of like the pinnacle of my life, I think, because designing's a pain in the butt. But, I think it was maybe an ego thing where I would find a property every now and then, and one of my clients would be like, yeah, I'm not really seeing it. And I would be like, what do you mean? All you have to do is this. I'd sketch stuff, and they'd be like, yeah, I'm going to pass. And so I'd be like, if one more person says no to that, I'm buying it myself. And then I would start doing it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a good supplement back then as a modern design realtor. It was cool to be like doing the stuff that you preach. It also taught me a whole lot about cost and how far you could push things and what you can't do. I couldn't rip out walls and do floor to ceiling glass or do some solid concrete wall or clad a whole building in steel necessarily, but you could still do cool. You could grind the concrete floors, you could sandblast. There's what you could do. And that's what I got pretty smart at. And then the market crashed, and I was very bored for 3 years. I did photography and still did a little real estate. But I said, when the market comes back, I want to help out downtown Phoenix. I don't think that, Scottsdale or Arcadia need me. So right in 2011, when things kind of bottomed out, I bought a historic house, and it had an ugly addition to it, and I modernized that addition.
Is this 2302?
It's a different house.
Oh, okay.
This is the house that I lived in.
Okay.
And everyone was like, you got to keep doing these. And it was weird. I had like a hybrid. I didn't really believe in, although I like it when other people do this, but I didn't believe in restoring or making it look like it did, a long time ago. I believed in, applying modern design to that historic house, but I had a rule system, and I only went after homes that were already heavily remodeled, like in the 80s or 90s, that were kind of stripped of their noble historic features. And I didn't want to go into like Willow or Encanto or any of those neighborhoods. I wanted to go after the ones that were more like workforce housing that had a lot of teardowns. And, I kind of settled on the Coronado Historic District and said, this neighborhood's perfect because its era of significance was like the 20s to like the 50s. There were so many different styles of homes that I figured this area would appreciate. It's also the motto is historically modern. I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I started doing, I might do a modern kitchen, but I would keep the hardwood floors, the fireplaces, the windows. I would keep all the historic details that I was like the judge and jury. I would decide to keep those prominent, but I would sprinkle modernism in between. And your question to me was why I was controversial. I think a lot of people are extremely protective of historic districts, and I think that I was one of the first to, kind of start modernizing these historic homes. And the thought would be, well, if this keeps happening over and over, we're not going to have any historic houses left that have their full integrity. But I kind of fought back with like, I do one or two a year, and I would show the before and afters, and people would laugh and be like, okay, you didn't ruin it.
Right.
And then I'd also be getting nominated for awards. I got nominated for a governor's award for that 2302 project.
Really?
Wow.
Would speak at all the historic preservation conferences, and at the same time I'd be getting a lot of heat from neighborhood groups, and that's their job, is to kind of be protective. But I finally kind of reached out and started talking to everyone, and I think now I don't know that I'm even that controversial with historic properties. I tend to like have like a little street movement that's looking out for me, that's always like pushing for me to get that project, particularly the mid-century ones.
Well, now that you've built such a name for yourself, people know that you're not going to.
And I take it seriously. And the mid-century stuff, I feel like, it's safe with me because I have a strong motto that, you're not supposed to make it about you. And my philosophy on mid-century is like, if you could resurrect that architect for a day and show him that property, would he give you the thumbs up, or would he go, what the hell did you do?
Right.
So that's something that I look at going, I'm not the guy that's going to change all the architectural features. I'm going to follow the language that existed and maybe make the kitchen and bathrooms more current and give it a nice little makeover without destroying the language that existed prior. But the one project that kind of was controversial, I loved it at the time. I finally just decided I'm going to do one. It was a like a 650 square foot house on a decent sized lot. It was like a 8,500 square foot lot in the Coronado Historic District. And I partnered with my friend Jonah Busick, who's an architect, and I love him. And I said, here's what I want to do. I want to do an addition that I consider, compatible, because the national standards say you need to be compatible yet distinguishable, which is tough.
Right.
But I went in and I did a steel and glass addition with the brick bungalow, and so it was the same size, and people in the neighborhood either loved it or were terrified of it. And now I think it's like one of the most cherished properties in the community. But I had said at the time, do you want your local designers to be non-controversial?
Yeah.
That's true. And I do think one of the things that we talked about on our call is one of the things that also makes you controversial is your lack of classical training, I think is one thing that
very much
differentiates you.
Yeah, I had a lot of peers of mine that would say, I went to school for this and you didn't. But I tend to think that my education is much more interesting. And one thing I'd start, confronting it when I'd hear these things, because I'd say, do you think you've outstudied me? Like, I have put in the work too. I've read nonstop and taught myself these things, but I also learn by doing. I've probably done about 25 properties that I've done personally, and you learn a whole lot. And also, something about me is like if someone doubts me, I'm just going to get better just to like be a thorn in their side.
Yeah, you definitely have the street smarts to go behind
and
all the design.
I always used to point out that all my idols were self-taught. in the world of architecture design.
Albedo.
Yeah, Albedo.
He's one of
He
the most.
eventually, yeah.
Yeah, he
eventually got it.
He eventually did
He
it,
did
but
when he was
originally,
50s,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
He was a
got it.
shop drawer for his dad.
Yep.
Yeah. So we talked about you hit on it a little bit earlier about doing things at a more affordable price point, kind of learning what you can and can't do. So how is it that you feel like you can elevate design and keep the cost lower for people?
Well, I think of a lot of times in the world of design, I think of it as kind of like weight classes. And I always look for where am I most needed? There's so much good architecture happening at that, $10 million range or $5 million and above. There's a lot of bad architecture too, but there's a lot of really good architects that specialize in that. I'm friends with a lot of them. Like I'm fanboy of Brent Kendall and Eddie Jones. There's quite a bit of them here that do that. And then there's like the mid range that might be like the $2 million to $5 million range. Not that that's all they ever get, but there's a lot of ranch minds and design tank that are doing such a good job. And occasionally I'll work on, I love getting a project that's up there. It has a higher budget. I get to showcase my skill set a little bit more. But I also have kind of joked around with my peers a lot about the path of a designer a good designer architect in Phoenix. You start out, you make a name, you make a splash in your neighborhood, you start doing cool stuff downtown in Arcadia and these Arcadia Light and these neighborhoods. And then the more popular you get, 5 years later, you're only doing projects in Paradise Valley or North Scottsdale or like Arcadia proper. And you're kind of ignoring like the real backbone of this city. And I'm a 4th generation native here. So, it works out good for me because these projects are kind of harder if you ask me. Like designing a new build, that's like a 4,000 square foot new build on a vacant lot is way easier than taking a 1,800 square foot house and doing a remodel plan and changing it all around and adding a 1,000 square foot addition on that. You don't have x-ray vision and it's hard to you have to be on site a lot afterwards. But I think that's my specialty is working with that because I didn't want to be inaccessible. I want people that have like a more modest financial profile to be able to get something that they're proud of. I also think of it as helping your city. These projects, you do one and it's almost like planting some really cool plant or something, and all of a sudden all the neighbors start doing something and it spreads. It's almost like this. I look at the influence you have on streets.
Yeah.
And at 5 years after you did your project, you go by and you see 3 more and you're like, whoa, all right.
There's whole HGTV shows about this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's Detroit and Mississippi, Northwest Arkansas. It's pretty amazing. I do think you're giving back to the community.
Thank you.
You really are. And if you go through Coronado, I mean, I think the first property I got to experience that you had done, I was selling in there and it was one of your homes. But now you go through Coronado and it just totally changed and you had a big impact on that.
Thank you.
So curious how your background in real estate affects your approach in design.
I feel like I wish other people could get the education that I got because when I started doing my projects, I had a ton of friends that were architects and I'd always go to them and say, hey, I got this house. Here's what I'm thinking. I would do, 20 sketches and floor plan, site plan and elevations and stuff. And I'd be like, this is what I'm thinking. But I need help drafting it. And I didn't want to, I hate those control freaks that are like, draft this. You're like, you left me zero room for creativity. But my friends a lot would, take a month drafting something else and hand it over. And I'd be like, all right, I love this, but this is like double what I have to spend. And I realized I have to start doing these myself because I know what it's going to cost instinctually. And back then I could design for like, this will be $130 a foot. This will be $150 a foot. And I could be pretty spot on. Now it's kind of a shit show. Sorry if I'm not allowed to cuss. But
No,
it's
no, for it.
That's fine.
you can't. It's so hard to estimate, but I can get it close still. It's something that real estate taught me also to be a little more fearless. There's always so many people making good money that will pay more. My first 2 projects I did, I love them more than anything, but this is when in Coronado, when the top, in fact, I think I broke the 200,000, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, a million, all the way up to 1.2 in like an 8-year period in Coronado. And I started getting called like gentrifier and king gentrification. And I was like, I'll stop. I think like I was thinking if you were in that neighborhood, you'd love me, but I wasn't thinking about the renters and people maybe getting pushed out. So I was like, I'll stop. But I do have friends that like really want me to design stuff. So I just won't work with any developers in that neighborhood.
Yeah. But also, I mean, I think with your real estate background, what we run into when if it's just architecturally based, just an architect without a real estate background, you run into how does the function of the house work and resale. Yeah. Like with your background, what buyers you're looking for. And so I can imagine that is really helpful in your career.
Say touring, 1,000 homes or something, and you're like, man, I could have sold this if they just would have redone the kitchen, or if they just would have done this, that it teaches
front
you.
landscape, curb appeal.
Or we'd always joke, like, you have 2,000 left, what's your move? And we're like, paint the neighbor's house. But like,
Never
also
thought about that.
It's not a bad idea.
But
I've done landscape before on a neighbor's house.
Yeah.
we would ask a lot, like, can we just clean your landscape up? Because the context matters. And Coronado is funny. Like a lot of these ones that would sell, I remember one sold really high, and if you look out the guest bedroom window, there was an abandoned ice cream truck in the neighbor's house with like plants growing out of it. And we're like, that's the Coronado
I think that's the one that I probably worked on. Yeah, it's like you almost want to, especially because there's no HOA, they can put whatever they want in their front yard, some of these neighbors. So
very diverse.
You could offer some sort of design wall to block it. Or...
Yes, we're working. We're in a situation like that right now, right? We're trying to figure out how to block some neighbors. So
ficus wall or but it's also important. There's some of the architects that I know, I will be so blown away by the architecture, but I'll look and I'm like, you took this house that was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and you made it into a 2-bedroom, 2-bath and spent $500,000 on it. Like, it's not going to do good when you go to sell it.
Yep.
You have to mind like this. In that, for me, I learned a whole lot by the appraisal issues I'd have. I would always do these wonderful projects. Oh, what I was going to say earlier was the first 2 projects I did, I would run into the owners like, about 6 months after I sold it, and I'd be like, how are you liking the house? And they'd be like, well, I love it, but we had a plumbing leak. And I was like, oh man, and one had a gas, like had to remove the whole gas line and redo it. And I was like, I feel awful. And I was like, I never want that to happen again. So I'm just going to replace every system. I'm going to use a licensed contractor, and I'm going to do everything the right way. But, I had to spend like an extra $50,000-$60,000 on these. And when I'd list them, they'd be so far above the comps, but I'd get 4 offers. And it was such a struggle with appraisers. But after a little while, I think my brand recognition grew, and people started paying for them. But really, I just made money to everyone behind the trail that I was blazing that would do like shoddier work.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about renovating these historic projects and, what kind of challenges you run into with those, which you just kind of mentioned. Obviously, there were some issues when you weren't replacing everything. Because that's one thing I know with the historic properties that we've sold, looking at those things upon inspection, some of the developers or whoever's doing the renovation does it the right way, and then some don't.
You just pretty much got to replace the sewer line, do all new plumbing and electrical, and some of them need a little bit of like foundation work or piers beneath the house. But some of the challenges, like one thing I love is you can't really change it from the outside. And I have a high level of respect for that. You can do cool, if it's already painted, you can give it a cooler paint scheme, more modern house numbers, a modern mailbox, and more modern landscape. But I love that I love the rules there that you're not supposed to really mess with the outside of the property, but you can mess with the back side of it. And one of the things with historic houses is I'm always fascinated by them. Like, I think, I grew up watching like Friends and Seinfeld, and everyone had a loft, and it was all this red brick loft. And I'm like, where are those in Phoenix? It was all textured stucco and orange peel texture inside the house, and we just had drywall and stucco everywhere. And I was, fascinated by the downtown stuff where you had like this masonry was so cool back then. And like real craftsmen that knew how to use wood and, carpentry and brick, and these really cool details. And we're in a, fifth largest city, and we don't have a loft warehouse district. So I kind of looked at that going, well, every now and then I could take one that is ripped of its, historic significance inside the home and just rip out the ceiling and vault it. And I'd kind of like reuse some of the wood for collar ties and I think a lot of those homes, they didn't really unfold to the outside back then. They had small closets, small pantries. Kitchens were obviously back then to prep the food, and not like now kitchens are the main hangout area. So you try to address all that in the addition and like solve everything that the historic house didn't have.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we're going to show some pictures of Skyview, which is your most recent project. I want just tell her. I mean, I've seen this all over different awards. I mean, I know, was it a Desert Design Week you guys were on?
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. So tell our listeners a little bit about this project.
Well, so my client on this, his name's Trent Hancock, and he comes from a big home builder background. His family is Camelot Homes, and he is way more into like the one-off projects that are really high design. And so he called me, I think it was like a Friday, and I had my son, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing right now? I want you to come see a property." And I was like, of course, no notice. But
right.
My son and I went there. And first it was, had a great view, but the home itself was extremely shabby. It was like a late 70s home that was all that thick, goopy stucco texture. It felt like a track home on the best lot. Worst house on the best lot. And you know how hard it is to build Hillside. So he said, "Can we make this into the coolest before and after ever?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." He had really good instincts about that house. I remember him, it's always a tough sell, people having that, like, call it like goggles, like that you put on that you just see the finished project, is a blessing and a curse. We couldn't understand how other people weren't sharing our passion for this. But, I think it's an example of a really good template or example for anyone that's wanting to keep their home. You can do so much to the ranch home. You can we did that dormer off the back that like made the architecture feel like way more superior. We did some hard things like, making the floor to ceiling glass essentially out of, we had to use steel but we wanted the views to be the main focal point. And I think it was a pretty avant-garde project.
Those photos right there remind me a little bit of like the Caneros Inn in Napa. Are you familiar with that project now? Any offers? I know it's not for sale, but I'm assuming somebody approached you
Some
guys.
of the people that stay there inquire about it. It's like a luxury Airbnb. And I think it gets, about $2,500 a night, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, it's time in our show. We want to do a little rapid fire. So a couple questions, super light, whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
You down?
Yes, of course.
All right. What is your favorite historic neighborhood in the Valley?
I have to say Coronado there.
I was going to guess that.
I was too. It sounds like that's
I like a
where your
lot of
roots
them,
are.
though. I'm such a fan of many, like, but Coronado.
Second favorite.
Second favorite, Alvarado.
I'm not familiar with that one. Are you?
Like 3rd Street and Monte Vista. It's where my new house is. So
Okay. I'll have to go drive
partial.
What is your favorite restaurant?
Ooh, Durant's.
by. Oh, I haven't been there.
What?
I know.
What's wrong with you?
I know a lot. It's on the list.
Okay.
I actually might know the answer to this one. What is the next up and coming neighborhood in Phoenix? My guess it's your second favorite right now.
Nope.
No? Okay.
That's a tough one, but I honestly, if I had like long money at play, Garfield. I think Garfield, I used to joke with my friends like 8 years ago. I was like, in like 8 or 10 years, we're all going to hate ourselves for not buying 1 or 2 properties in Garfield, but we can right now for, 150,000 and we're not. And now they're, 450. So
True.
I think the same thing moving forward. It's so close to ASU, it's walking distance, and, Gen Z is going to buy those up and need a cool place to live. And downtown Phoenix keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, it's true.
It does. It's definitely.
And they allow for a lot of like diverse architecture there. That's like the historic modern, the new one kind of up and coming, if you ask me.
Yeah. So
You guys know
invest in
Christoph?
Garfield.
Yeah. Do you guys know Christoph Kaiser? He's like the OG of that neighborhood doing amazing stuff. He did amazing stuff in like the mid 2000s. That's just
An architect or what is he? Okay, we'll have to look him up.
Yeah. What's your favorite way to unwind?
Ooh. I think I was a workaholic for a long time. I didn't know it, but now I have to have a lot of downtime. And honestly, like time with my son, on weekends we'll play frisbee golf. And then like after school a lot, we'll do his homework, which you have to be extremely present for.
Yes.
And it's hard.
How old is he?
He's in 5th grade.
Oh, yeah. It's getting hard. It will get worse.
I know.
That's awesome. Okay, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Ooh, best advice pertains more to when I had my child, and my really close friend. He was about 4 months old, and he was such a pain in the butt. And I said to my friend, I can't wait till he's like 2, and he's out of this phase where he's just trying to like crawl around and off himself. And my friend was like, don't do that, because when he's 2, it'll be another thing. And when he's 3, he might not do that, but he'll do the new thing. You have to be present and not wish your life away. And I always think about that.
Love that.
That's such great advice. And coming from 2 people that have children significantly older than yours, I think every stage is, there's something great about every
Fun and
stage.
awful.
Yeah, exactly. Fun and awful.
The hard
For
just
sure.
gets different kind of hard.
It does.
Even my son is 20.
Yeah.
What?
What?
How are you old enough? Anyway, sorry.
I was young. I didn't do it the right way. Okay.
Mine's 15, and we are just entering into the driving stage. So
A rough one.
It is, but again, it's been good too. Like when we started a few months ago, it was the scariest thing I've ever been through in my life.
I'm not looking
And
forward to
now I feel a little better about it.
Good.
So, yeah. So Joel, thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and sharing with our listeners. We're going to link all of your contact information in our show notes, but if you could let our listeners know where they could find you.
Mainly social media. I have a very, I think, a popular page that I give a decent amount of contact to, which is just Joel Contreras Design. And then I have my personal one that I'll post like really cool stuff that I get like 50 likes on it if I'm lucky. But that's like the real me, I guess,
And what's the address there?
That's just, I think, Joel Contreras 1.
Okay.
But either one of those, I'm easy to find.
All right. Well, thank you.
Great.
That's it for today's episode of Modern Home Mastermind. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and rate.
Thanks to our guests for giving us his insights, and to you, our listeners, thanks for learning about everything modern with us.
And if you are ready to take the next step in your real estate journey, please reach out to us at Bespoke Real Estate. And until next time, keep living, loving everything modern.